It's really hard. I don't want to lie to people, right? So when I do talk to VCs who are younger, looking to make partner, looking to sit in boardrooms, looking to do the types of things you do as a partner at a VC firm as a female, I'm just very honest with people. It does suck looking around the room and being the only woman in there, often.
Hi, welcome to another episode of the Go Slow to Grow Fast podcast, brought to you by Mercury. I'm Heath Butler, your host and a Mercury venture partner. Today, our guest is the fabulous Samantha Lewis, a partner at Mercury and a recent Kauffman Fellow, as well as baby Alexander.
Yeah.
So Sam, baby Alexander, welcome to the show.
Thank you. We're so excied.
Yeah.
You had about one more week, Heath, to get this
done, huh?
So
Well,
glad.
It's excited because we're here today, as well as baby's coming soon.
Yeah.
How you feeling?
A few weeks. I'm ready.
You're ready?
I'm so ready. I was ready to do this podcast, and then it's time.
It's time.
Hopefully I walk
It's
out
time.
and go straight to the hospital, and he's born.
Well, it's super exciting that you work for a firm that you're able to keep working and get it all in. And how's your experience been?
It's
Working and pregnant and
Yeah, it's been exhausting, of course, because your body is like growing a human.
Right,
but
right.
the support from y'all and the surprise baby shower last week was awesome. And
Yeah, that
it's
was
just
exciting.
I felt very supportive by all of y'all and everyone else at Mercury. And it's just, I feel lucky. I feel fortunate.
good. Well, I'm glad you're here. We're happy to do it, and we're happy to see you happy.
Thank you.
Well, today we are going to have a little bit of fun. The venture industry's been changing over the last couple of decades, as usual. And it's been driven by a lot of technological advances, regulatory changes, and most importantly, some macro events, right? As we look at the next 10 years, the industry's poised for continued evolution, and it's going to be driven by you and your colleagues, right? The millennial venture capitalists.
Oh, yeah. Can't wait.
Can't wait. So today, I really want to dig into what and who is changing venture capital, what you expect to happen, talk a little bit about your Kauffman experience and your peers, and get some visibility into what founders should be thinking about when they're approaching people like you.
Perfect. Excited.
I'm sure you are. Before we get there, though, let's talk about you, right? And your journey. You've had an amazing journey to venture, two-time entrepreneur, and went back to school, got your MBA, and you're on this ride with Mercury. So tell us about it. Tell us all about your journey and how you got here.
Yeah. So I actually met Blair and Aziz, two of our partners at Mercury, while they were my professors in business school. And so that was back in 2015. And so Blair, Aziz, and then Dan, who now runs Mercury Data Science and one of the co-founders of Blair of Mercury, as some of y'all or most people know, have been mentoring me for years. And so it was really great. I met you through the ecosystem a few years later.
Yep.
And it's just been really cool to be able to see my journey evolve into landing at what I think is the premier venture capital firm. And so, I could fast forward through the beginning, two-time entrepreneur, like you said. I think what's most important about that, especially in this market environment, which I know we'll get to that conversation in a little bit, is that I built two companies that were not venture-backed, two successful companies not venture-backed. So I had to think about cash flow all the time. So I was managing cash flow, and I was just building a business. I was building a sustainable business. How do I make sure I pay my bills this month? How do you make sure you pay your bills next month? And it's not external capital. That was never the answer. And so applying that and those lessons learned into the market we're in now, where the era of free money is kind of over, I think is really, really great insight for me to have for our companies and for Mercury. So that's what I did for 5 years after undergrad, went back to business school and thought, how can I apply everything I learned as an entrepreneur and starting businesses to high-tech scalability, finance, and eventually VC. And so I knew I wanted to jump into the investing side of it soon. Attempted to start a few companies during business school with some friends. some business school friends. We spun out a technology out in one of the labs at Rice.
Okay.
And that company is still up and running. And so that was a success.
Which company was that?
That was called Trace Matters.
Trace Matters. Okay.
Yeah. And so the founder, the inventor of that technology got a big grant from the State Department. And we decided collectively as a team that was the best thing to do. But it didn't make sense from 2 MBAs to then now run a commercial enterprise on something that was going so heavy into what became a smaller market because of the State Department grant we took.
Okay.
So technology is amazing, but from a commercial standpoint, it didn't really make sense anymore.
Right.
And so from there, jumped to Goose Capital, which is a super angel group kind of structured like a multifamily office.
Well, it wasn't Goose Capital when you started.
It was not. That I got to apply my entrepreneurial skills there too to figure out how do we make this group of people, 25, ultra high net worth, very, very successful people, mostly entrepreneurs or big time industry execs. How do they were investing $10 million a year. There was no structure. There was no investment thesis. There were no themes we were following necessarily.
Right.
There was individually, but how did we do that collectively as a firm?
Right.
And so that was really my job for 3 years. So I did that as the investment director at what is now known as Goose Capital. And then I ran all of the front office investing activities as well, from sourcing all the way through diligence.
Yeah.
And then got a lot of board experience behind some of these people, which was really, really great. Leveraged that into becoming a partner track person at Mercury in 2020. And now here we are.
That's awesome. Awesome. Quite the journey. And, similar to mine, it doesn't always have to, be through an investment bank and then B school and then right in. Those entrepreneurial experiences really give you some a different level of understanding and perspective and empathy and insight sometimes. So both paths work.
Yes, I think empathy's key. One of our core values at Mercury is entrepreneurial empathy. Yep. And it's super, super clear to me when you work with VCs outside of our Mercury walls, like whether we're sitting on boards with them or potentially thinking about co-investing with them, if they don't have entrepreneurial experience or at least some sort of deep exposure to give them that empathy. And I think entrepreneurs pick up on it too. So
no, that's good. So then you get started at Mercury, and based on Aziz being a Kauffman Fellow, we encourage you to check that program out.
Yes.
Apply. You did. You got accepted, and you're graduating from the Kauffman program in a matter of months, right?
Next summer.
Next summer.
Don't remind me. I'm so sad. I wish it would last forever, kind of like business school. But so the network lasts forever.
So for those out there that don't know about the Kauffman program, tell us about it and why you're excited to be a part of it.
Well, first of all, I'm excited because you're my official mentor through Kauffman. So thank you for all the time you put in to be that. So Kauffman is a fellowship for junior partners, partner track, and emerging manager VCs to come together over a 2-year period to really focus on how do we level up to be the absolute best VCs you can be. So a really easy way to think about it is I describe it as kind of a YPO meets a business school. And so you're really learning how to apply a lot of the hard skills that we've gotten over our careers. But at the same time, they put a really heavy emphasis on the personal development piece and making sure that you're self-aware. And I think that's something that we'll talk about a lot today as we're talking about millennials. And we're talking about how we take a different approach sometimes than former generations. And I think it's super, super people-centric and people-forward in a way that like the industry either wasn't mature enough for yet or our generation is just helping to usher in. And that's why I love Kauffman so much, because we think about how do you bring your best self to work every single day? And we do the work to make sure you're bringing your best self to work every day so that you can be the best partner for the entrepreneurs we invest in.
And you're not talking, when you say personal development, you're not just talking about technical skills. You're also talking about the soft skills.
Oh, it's the soft skills for sure. So we do the hard skills, but a lot of us have those because that's our day-to-day job, right? So we're building the hard skills, and some of the sessions we do are very focused on that. That is true. We're getting to level up through conversations with each other. My class, for example, has 60 VCs from all over the globe, from top tier firms to emerging managers.
Right.
And so we all get to learn from each other,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really great on the hard skills. And then the soft skills is just something that's, I think, so often overlooked when it comes to a lot of the literature that's out there on how to be a great VC.
Right.
And so Kauffman really focuses on that. And it's interesting because this is such a high pressure job. We're all so busy all the time. Getting together once a quarter in person and just sitting back for 2 days and hyper focusing on that, or actually it's 3 days, hyper focusing on that, forces you to actually prioritize things that we don't necessarily do in our day to day. And so it's been really eye-opening. It's been a great journey for me, and hopefully the firm, because I do try to bring back some of the lessons. And
you bring back a lot of good stuff.
Highly recommend Kauffman. Yeah.
No, that's great. So how has Kauffman changed your perspective on the industry and investing?
I think Kauffman confirms something that I already hit on for me. I'm a very people-centric person anyways, as you are too, and we know this. And so there was always this struggle or this dynamic between how do you really do the best job to drive financial returns for our investors, which is the most important thing that we can do to stay relevant as a firm, right? So how do you do that in a way that you're still making sure you are being very people forward? Entrepreneurial empathy, which we already hit on. That's a piece of it, but it's really understanding yourself too and having empathy for yourself, because this is a high pressure job, as you know. It's very stressful. We have a lot of pressure, just like the entrepreneurs do. And so making sure that we're waking up every day and knowing that what we're doing, it's okay if you make mistakes, right? It's okay. How do you get through those mistakes? And the entrepreneurs are going to make mistakes. Our CEOs are going to make mistakes. How do we might make decisions together that are a mistake when we look back. And so it's really understanding, like, how do we apply the frameworks of the lessons we learn every day to our future selves to make sure we're making better decisions. And I think intuitively, I always thought that, but being able to put it into a framework and being able to have like really strong, robust conversations about that with a group of peers who are all in the same situation we are has been really eye-opening for me, because it gives me almost just the, hey, Sam, it's okay to hyper-focus on this for a little while, right? And not just hyper-focus on the technical skills or the new technology coming out and making sure I'm fully up to speed on that, which is also important. But it's like, oh, this is also a super key piece to making sure you're a great VC. And it's almost just giving you the like, it's okay. Focus on it, work on it, apply everything you learn. And that's the way you become a top tier firm and a top tier investor, is not just focusing on one, but focusing on both together.
No, that's really good. That's really good. So, so now let's switch to how you keep up with the external stuff, right? The technological advances and all of the market developments and all of the changing things that are happening in our universe. How do you keep up? You know, obviously, you may learn a few things at Kauffman. I'm sure you learn a few things around the office. But how do you personally do that to make sure you're the best? You got the best insight for the entrepreneurs.
Right. Yeah, that's a lot of reading, a lot of research, which I love market research. So it's perfect. I'm a very typical MBA. I'm like, let's do this market research work. And so a lot of research goes into it for a base level understanding. And then what I realized during COVID, when I'm not great at always networking, only digitally. And so during COVID, I didn't do it as much. And all I did was read and research. But I didn't supplement it with my network as much as I had before and as I do now. And I started to realize a gap, because you can read and research all day, but if you're not surrounding yourself with the brightest minds and the other people who are doing that, then they're not going to be able to poke holes in the way I'm thinking about things. They're not going to be able to push me, and vice versa. Through me pushing you on something, then I might actually learn, oh, that's not the right way I should be thinking about it. And so I think it's super important to add that dimension. So it's, of course, the hard work and the disciplined work, which is the research and the reading. But on top of that, it's making sure you're surrounding yourself with very intelligent, very forward-looking, entrepreneurs, corporate strategic buyers,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that you're matching technological innovation with commercial interest. And the only way to do that is really conversations. You can't just learn from what people are writing,
Right.
right?
No, that's a really good one because we do that a lot at Mercury. Definitely learning from the corporates, learning from some of the strategic buyers, what's important to them, what they're doing, and how the things are shifting over time, right?
For sure. And we have to. And like blockchain is a great example, and I'm sure we'll hit on it at some point during this podcast. But if blockchain's not ready for mainstream, corporations, aren't adopting. I'm not saying that's the case. It is. And I think corporations are starting to adopt it. But that's what we've seen over the past, 13, 15 years of it being a very new technology. But if people weren't ready to adopt it yet, then it can only go so far. And so you almost have to match the technological innovation, which is incredible and super fun for us as VCs, especially early stage VCs. I think that's why we do this job. But it's really important to match that with commercial interest and viability. And I think if you leave out the corporate partners and the strategic discussions there as we're exploring markets and technological innovation, then you're leaving out a very key piece to success.
Well, and it also helps us to understand how to respond to entrepreneurs and help them understand what the strategics are looking for. Because ultimately, we're trying to sell the company, right?
Right.
So that everybody wins. And usually when we know something that maybe the entrepreneur doesn't, it could help them to create a better product or to create a better offering. So that's exciting. When you think about what has happened over the past 20 years, it seems like every time there's a major macro event, there's a shift in our industry, right? So you think about the dot-com bubble in 2000, the financial crisis in 2008, now COVID in 2020. There are these opportunities that come as a result. When you think about everything you're learning about in Kauffman and all of the experiences and everything we just talked about, what do you see in the future? Like, how's the industry shifting and changing? You just talked about blockchain. Like, what do you see out there 10 years out?
It's a really interesting question. So if we're just talking about the VC industry, which I know that's not just the question, but there's an interesting thought that I've been putting a lot of mental share into lately as we're going through a cycle, right? A lot of us as millennials especially, and as new partners at firms, new-ish partners at firms, really all of our investing experience comes from a bull run, right?
Correct.
So it's super interesting to think about, okay, so we learned that. How do you act in a hype cycle?
Yep.
Okay, great. Check mark.
Yep.
Now, how do you act when you're in a bear market, right? And so I think that is really interesting. I've been spending a lot of time thinking about that, like more as a VC, as an industry, with a lot of us that were trained during a bull market. So luckily at Mercury, I'm the only millennial, and so y'all are constantly keeping me on my toes and reminding me of these things. But a lot of emerging managers or a lot of people who are run just by millennial firms, they're having to look external for those things. So I think when I think about the 10 years, kind of the next 10 years of VC evolving, what I think about is, I don't know if it's going to be in 10 years or when the next one is, but there's going to be another hype cycle. I just don't think our industry is necessarily set up to avoid hype cycles.
Correct.
Even if we could fix that, I mean, let's try, but I don't know how we would, because right now the LPs incentivize funds to drive hype cycles, especially the mega funds over the last, 5-10 years. That's what we saw. And so how do we now, as future leaders of the industry, as Gen Xers and especially boomers are retiring, how do we think about that as we go through cycles? And how do you make a more healthy hype cycle where you're not throwing away so much money? And so I think there's going to be a lot of financial discipline put into the way people think about growth and think about companies. And there's going to be some more sustainability of business models built into diligence and things like that we just didn't really see a lot of. It was about access, and it was about how much money you could raise and how much money you could throw at a problem.
Right.
That didn't necessarily work. The power law is true in venture, but it's not always the best model.
Correct.
right? Because there's so many other ways to build very, very successful businesses without throwing so much money away. And so I think people are really interested to look outside of just those hype-driven companies. One. Two, I think there's a few key macro events that that we're going to keep experiencing. Right. There's a lot of geopolitical change right now with America potentially sharing its superpower status with China. Right. There's the Russia-Ukrainian war. There's all these things that are happening that are going to create some technological opportunities, I think, especially on the security side and the defense side. So a lot of people will be looking at that. And ESG, like our planet needs help. And the only way we help our planet is figuring out technological ways to combat climate change. And so I think we're going to see a lot of investment on necessary technological innovations over the next 10 years.
No, it's interesting you mentioned this idea of a more disciplined approach, right, for investors as well as for companies, right?
Sure. Yeah.
During COVID, it really framed up this notion of resilience and adaptability. How do you think companies need to get more discipline in the future to sort of make sure they're fundable? So right now, the name of the game is cash flow, cash management, and how long your runway is, right? So do you believe that that's going to also continue into the future, where companies that have learned how to be resilient and adaptable are going to keep that going, or you think it's going to fold into another hype cycle?
Eventually, it will probably fold into a hype cycle, though now learning what a lot of us have learned over the past 15 years, 10 to 15 years, I think hopefully we hold as an industry, as the people writing the checks, hopefully we can also hold some discipline there, because I think entrepreneurs are often pushed by VCs to be more growth-minded, to be more hype-driven, not necessarily where we invest, but definitely on the coasts. And so that might shift. We'll see. I think what's really interesting about it is that people have to start understanding what really drives down the cost of capital.
Right.
Right. And I think as people start to understand that more, especially entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs' mindset is going to continue to shift to focus on that. So, of course, don't ever run out of money. But what else can you be doing? Building into your business right now that makes sure that you get to control your own destiny and you get to lower your cost of capital. And as the market starts to open up, there's going to be new opportunities there.
So you also mentioned ESG and impact investing earlier. And the question really is, did it disappear or has it just evolved? What do you think?
I'm so glad you asked, Heath, especially in the context of the podcast today, because there's an important piece that I do want to say about my peers at Kauffman, of which many are millennials, not all. But it's the more and more that I network throughout this industry and really understand the future leaders of VC, it is much more woven into our DNA, let's say, than it is previous generations. As individuals. And so the goal is that it is woven into every decision we make. And at this point, I do want to brag a little bit about Mercury. One of the key reasons I joined Mercury during, my interview process when I was interviewed with many firms was Blair told me, you will be successful here if your worldview, when it comes specifically, we were talking about impact and ESG, if your worldview is woven through every decision you make and you're able to bring that to the forefront here. And so it almost gave me the okay to come in and raise the flag on a lot of these things, as you know, because we've done it a lot together. And so I think embracing that is super important. Why have we seen less chatter about it? I think a lot of people jumped on that as a hype train as well, right? And so when you jump on a trend as a hype train as opposed to a technological innovation as a hype train, it can just go away. And so I think people were using it for LP dollars. People were using it to try to attract entrepreneurs. But there was a lot of conversation among those of us who have been kind of screaming it from the rooftops before it was even really a hype cycle, that you have to put your money where your mouth is. And I think there's a disappointment right now among at least my friends when we have conversations about this, because the hype didn't move the needle when it comes to funding underrepresented entrepreneurs. It just didn't move the needle. And the only thing that does move the needle, this is specifically on the S, right? But the thing that does move the needle is more diverse check writers. And the more diverse check writers can write more diverse checks. And then doing that, it's a cycle. As you know, with your work at Urban Capital Network, right?
Yep.
By making money and investing that money back into the community, then that community flourishes and thrives and can continue to innovate. Well, it's the same thing when it comes to making sure that you're investing in diverse entrepreneurs and on the S side of the ESG, because they're solving problems that the white males just aren't solving because they haven't necessarily felt it the same way, right?
Correct.
And so it's super important for us to think about that. And then I'll kind of leave it with this. I think it's inherent where everyone is just starting to understand. There are two very, very important things, right? Making sure our planet is inhabitable and making sure that the people are healthy, can live their life, and can, pursue happiness and their dreams.
Right.
And if you're not, whatever you want to call it, doesn't even have to be ESG. But I think we could all agree that those two things are very important.
Right.
And so then how do we make sure that we all embrace that and that we're putting our money where our mouth is when it comes to that? And then, okay, I'm very passionate about this subject, as you know.
No, you're doing well.
The next thing that it all comes down to, if it is just about returning LP dollars, and this is what's so insane to me, when people push back on this ESG movement, or they push back on, making sure that you're investing outside of the norm, what has been the norm in the VC industry, is McKinsey came out with a report a few years ago. A higher ESG score translates to a 10% lower cost of capital. Period. So data is emerging to fully back that. So there is literally no reason not to do it. There's none.
I totally agree. Totally agree. So tell us this: how are you taking advantage of this sort of evolving future and incorporating it into your sort of investment thesis?
Yeah, I love my investment theme. Thank you for bringing it up, Heath. So my theme at Mercury Fund is called the Power Theme, and it's all about using technology to empower people. And it's specifically around FinTech and Web3, and Web3 meaning really anything that touches blockchain. But it doesn't just have to be that, right? As you know, you've actually invested in many companies that would fall under a power theme. And it doesn't just have to be those, but I think it's super interesting to just use a thematic area of interest to me, which is empowering people, like I was mentioning earlier. So how do I use that to make data-driven decisions when it comes to what's really needed? And so there's massive economic opportunity there, and being able to think about how you can put more money into the hands of more people is a massive economic opportunity, and it actually solves a lot of some of the other things that we're seeing pop up across democracies in the world. And so how do we do it, right? And technology is a great way to do it. And so I get to spend all my time thinking about that and investing in companies like that, and it feels really great.
So let's shift gears a little bit to dig deeper into the generational differences. Given the rich legacy Kauffman has for shaping future leaders, how do you see your generation of Kauffman Fellows continuing this trend?
Yeah, I think we've hit on it briefly on a few different things, but I will try to summarize and summarize concisely here. Is one, like I said, most of my class, we are millennials, not all, but most of us are, and we've gone through a lot. We were graduating college during the great financial crisis, or just entering the workforce, right? Then we went through COVID. And now we're going through geopolitical shifts, major geopolitical shifts, and we're going through a absolute climate crisis. So when you think about resiliency and adaptability and some other things like that, I think that being inherent into who we are as a generation is just our lived experience in a bit of a different way than it was for other generations. And not saying it was harder or worse, it's just different, right? So I think that's really interesting. I also think
Do you think that causes you to approach investments differently than previous generations?
in a way, but I think it more so causes us to approach people in a different way and to approach governmental institutions. So how do we do that in a way that's sustainable, that works for building a family? How do we do that in a way that isn't chasing after every dollar no matter what, if it's going to kill the climate? Right. So all of these things that we've experienced, or chasing after every dollar if it's going to lead to the great financial crisis.
Right.
And so all the different things that we've experienced have shaped who we are now as we're like kind of entering what I think is our prime of the next 20 years or so of us being able to eventually run things once all y'all decide to retire.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you think of one of the areas you guys think differently about is globalization.
Yeah.
Right. So technology has advanced, made it a little bit easier, but you're also thinking about it different than my generation. Tell me more about that. Like, how do you think about
Or you have
deals?
to be global.
Right.
You absolutely have to be, for the most part. Not every company, I'm saying, but you have to think global perspective. And especially, we're very privileged and we're very lucky because we're in the US and this is a massive market. We have a pretty mature venture market. We have a pretty mature technological market, regulatory system, banking system, et cetera. But Kauffman is such a global program, it's really helped me to understand if you are living outside of the US, and especially in a smaller market or a less mature market when it comes to some of those things I just listed, then you have to think outside of your country's borders. You can be a great VC in the US and probably never invest outside of the US. Like, that's okay, right? But especially depending on the size of the fund. But that just isn't the case for many, many, many other regions. And so when you think about opportunity is so much bigger than just your region.
Right.
I say that knowing like we are a regionally focused VC, and I think that's great and it works for us, right? But that doesn't mean our companies aren't thinking about global markets. We absolutely are, right? Had a call this morning with one of our companies, and someone was in Asia, someone was in Africa, and someone was here. Topple, for example, one of our other portfolio companies, has employees all over the world.
Right.
And so when we're thinking about how we invest, borders are going to start breaking down, right? Especially with things like new ways to transact, cross-border payments, what blockchain can enable through cryptocurrency. There's all sorts of different ways where physical borders aren't going to be as important over the next few decades. And so how are you thinking about a global world, global markets, and making sure that you're building for a global market? Because I believe that the best companies will be thinking about that from the beginning. Whether they're executing on a global strategy or not, they'll be thinking about it from the beginning.
Yeah, that's really interesting because probably 10 years ago, when companies are talking to their VCs about global expansion, it's sort of like, why are you doing that? Why do you need to do that? Versus your generation, you're asking, when are you going to do that?
Yeah. Well, and sometimes what's super interesting is when we think about persona work or we think about our ICP, right? The ideal customer persona. It doesn't have to be within borders. It's actually about buying behavior. Right? It's about, or can be. And so that isn't necessarily just meaning something regional or geographically. And so especially with so much more communication tools accelerated by COVID, so much more digital networking, it starts to become where that's going to become less and less relevant for some companies, not for all companies, but for some companies, I believe it will.
No, that's really good. That's really good. So look, we both work at a very inclusive firm in Mercury. That's, as you said earlier, that's why we chose it. Same with me, right? I think when I was thinking about some of the things I wanted to do, Blair's like, just come do it here, right? You leverage our platform and do it here. And that was really positive. As we think about what we've experienced during this hype cycle and some of the S on the ESG front, right? Both you and I are thinking about the underrepresented entrepreneur, as well as how do you frame and build in diversity and inclusivity throughout everything you do,
Yep.
right? That
Yep.
also kind of leads to the whole female perspective. So as you said earlier, there's only 5%, less than 5% of VCs are females. Tell us a little bit about that experience, and you don't like to be thought of as a female VC, but the reality is you're a female VC,
Yeah.
right? So where's your head at there in that respect, and where do you think we are in the industry, and where are we headed, and regarding female VCs?
Yeah. It's really hard. I don't want to lie to people, right? So when I do talk to VCs who are younger, looking to make partner, looking to sit in boardrooms, looking to do the types of things you do as a partner at a VC firm as a female, I'm just very honest with people. It does suck looking around the room and being the only woman in there often.
Mm-hmm.
Often, right?
When it's one thing for you to change what's happening at your firm.
Oh, for
but
sure.
But to try to change an industry, and perspectives, that's even harder.
Yes, and that's the thing. Y'all at Mercury know, like, if there's something where I don't agree, I'm going to tell you guys, and you're going to push back, and then we're going to all come to a resolution together, because that's what partners do.
Yes.
Right? And that's what we do together as a firm. But you're choosing me every day to be your partner, and I'm choosing you every day to be my partner.
Right.
Where when you're trying to change an industry, it's you don't have the same maybe respect and affection for each other as we do as partners when it comes to Mercury or the entrepreneurs we're working with. And so when it comes to changing the industry, to kind of pick back up where I was, it's just recognizing that it's stubborn. It is very stubborn.
Mm-hmm.
I came in probably post business school really thinking, okay, idealistic rose-colored glasses on, here's how you make change.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned a lot of lessons over the past now almost 7 years. And some things worked. Maybe some things didn't. I know some things didn't. I hope some other things that I'm unsure on are working.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line is, I think you have to talk about it. You have to be really honest about it. And if you're not the female in the room, I think it's super important, and you know this as my mentor and just my partner, is someone else also has to be advocating for you. And so you have to find sponsors and you have to find advocates. But the only way that people do that for someone else is by unlearning all of our biases. And I think so many people just have to start there. Start at square one. And I try to do this all the time. And I try to encourage people to call me out if they're recognizing a bias. But it's, what biases do I have? What biases am I bringing to this meeting? What biases might I be bringing to this perspective? And how do I question that to make sure that I am being as inclusive as possible? And that's really hard work, and it's really uncomfortable work. And a lot of people just don't do it.
No, they don't want to do it.
And even if they want to, they probably don't prioritize it because it's hard.
Well,
right?
It also makes you a better VC, right? Because you then don't bring those biases to the table with the entrepreneur.
Yeah. And if you do, guess what? Again, your cost of capital is going to be higher, and you're not going to drive as successful as outcomes. Because also it's about, as an entrepreneur and as a CEO, it's about retaining talent. And Gen Z and millennials care so much about these things. And so like it makes good business sense to be inclusive mindset, but it's hard, like everything in business. And so you have to apply yourself, I think, in the rigor and the intellectual rigor we apply to everything, to this as well.
So Sam, as we wrap up, what are you doing to change this status quo from the female perspective? And what do you want your legacy to be in venture?
There's two things I'm doing. There's the grand vision and all the plans of really being able to drive change, right? And that is making sure there's more diverse check writers. More diverse check writers, write more diverse checks, specifically on this study I referenced earlier from 2020 by Women in VC. Even a female partner, despite her race or ethnic or sexual orientation, she still writes more diverse checks across the board, not just to more females. And so that's super important. This is like a mission of my life. How do we get more female check writers into the industry, right? That's super important. On the day-to-day, though, it is making sure that I continue to have open and honest conversations, that I continue to build trust with people like you who I can go to and say, hey, I think I experienced this. And you maybe give me an alternative perspective and say, that might not have been biased. That might have been this.
Right.
Good point. Let me go talk to them about that.
Right.
Right. And so being able to give me the tools through all the experience you have. And so that's the day-to-day work that I have to put in to really be able to grow. Because the thing is, hiring female analysts, associates, junior partners isn't enough. You have to retain them. And I think it's often very lonely being the only woman in the room. And so how do we make sure that we're all educating ourselves to make sure that we're retaining that talent once they come to the industry? Because you don't want all the female finance professionals, not just in VC, it's actually across finance as an industry, they often leave. And it's because it's unsustainable, because it's set up not for the type of environment that necessarily works. So I think that's really important, but it's the day-to-day work you do and then really just continuing to talk about it and have open and honest conversations with it. And as far as my legacy, I want to be known as one of the best VCs
Of course.
ever, and not just a female VC. I hope someone says one of the best VCs ever someday and doesn't have to put female in front of my name, even though I'm super proud of being a woman, right? But you don't have to put me into a category all the time, right? And so if you can have a legacy that's saying, one, you're the best of your industry. Oh, guess what? And you're a female. That's really cool. Instead of one of the best female VCs, right? And so that's what I'm working on.
Awesome. Well, there you have it. We'll leave it there. Samantha Lewis, Kauffman Fellow, and one of the future best VCs ever.
Thank you. Because of you.
Thanks, Sam. We appreciate your time today.
I appreciate it.